power from the same battery pack, because earlier in case of IC engine vehicles, the same thing used to happen. So all these equipments were demanding power from the engine. Engine used to have a alternator which is always connected to it, and this alternator converts the mechanical energy into electrical and supplies it to the auxiliary equipments which are like LV loads, and it is also charging the auxiliary battery pack as well, which is on the vehicle. So there are some low voltage components as well. Low voltage components like this auxiliary battery pack, which is either 12 volt or 6 volts or 24 volt based on what kind of vehicle you have, either two-wheeler car or passenger car or a heavy commercial vehicle. So based on that, the voltages are like 6 volts, 12 volts or 24 volts. And this auxiliary system also is connected to auxiliary LV loads, headlamp, tail lamp, brake lamps, indicator lamps, turn indicator lamps, reverse parking assist, and reverse lights are there. So many things are connected to this auxiliary battery. Apart from that, there are controllers which are also demanding power from the auxiliary 12 volt supply or 24 volt supply, and these are this BMS. So this orange color line which you see, a thin orange color line, that is showing the LV power connections, and auxiliary battery is demanding the energy from battery pack here, and at the same time it is also supplying energy to the BMS. So the auxiliary battery pack might be supplying energy to the BMS. So that's why we might have shown only one line here. Now the same auxiliary battery pack is supplying energy to the VCU, to the motor control unit, to the vehicle control unit, to the LV loads, and so many different controllers. There is also VCCU. Now there are some dotted lines which you see. The black dotted lines are communication lines. So this is representing how communication between different components is happening, and most of these communications terminate at vehicle controller, which is a master controller. Now vehicle controller is connected to the motor controller, to the DC-DC which is sitting inside the PDU, or the same DC-DC can also sit inside the battery pack. Multiple architectures are there. There is also a BMS which is connected to the VCU, and VCU talks with the BMS, talks with the DC-DC, also controls motor controller and vehicle charge controller unit VCCU here at the top. Charger is also connected to the VCCU, and there is a communication between charger and VCCU. There is communication between VCCU and HMI interfaces and other peripherals, and so many different things. So VCU is also taking input from sensors like accelerator pedal is there, brake pedal, emergency switch, and gear and gearbox, and so on. So it just needs to know what is the, if it is a multi-stage and multi-speed gearbox, at what gearbox speed it is running currently, that it just needs to know, and that gear input is also given to the VCU. So multiple inputs are there. We have just shown some representative inputs, but like there are several inputs which are coming towards VCU. And then there is a service disconnect switch which is shown between battery pack and PDU. So if you just switch, if you just open this switch, whole vehicle will be having no power at all. Okay, so that's how vehicle architecture looks like. Now let's see how energy flow in the EV takes place. We saw the whole energy is mostly coming from the charger here at the top. So this particular diagram can be studied by starting at any point on this diagram. Just give me a moment. So let's say if we start here at the top, here is our charger. EV charger is giving energy to the battery. There is a charging unit in between, battery charging unit in between, and this unit also has some inefficiencies. Battery charger unit has some inefficiencies. There is energy inefficiency in the battery itself. So there is some inherent losses in the battery during charging, because battery also has some resistance of itself. So when you try to charge it, because of the internal resistance, there are some losses. So these losses are currently shown as charging losses here. 1% of the energy gets lost in the charging losses. Some of the energy is also available through recuperation, regeneration. So this recuperation is also known as kinetic energy recovery system, KERS, and this KERS is responsible for charging some part of the battery's capacity, and most of the part is available through EV charger. During regeneration, again, there are some losses. Let's say if these are 5.5%, then total energy which is supplied to the battery pack will be 98.5, because there is 1.5 loss, 1.5% loss, 1% in EV charging and 0.5 in recuperation. Now, if I assume that after having this 98.5% energy, let's say if the battery is 100% charged, that means the energy supplied through charger is more than 100. So if it is 100% charged, during discharge, again, there will be some discharge losses in the battery pack. Again, that are owned by most probably the uh, resistance losses in the battery pack itself. So the battery pack has so many, again, electrical connections within itself, and at the same time the cells themselves have some electrical resistance. And whenever there is a resistance, there will be I square R loss, and these discharge losses take place. Let's say if they owe around 2% of the loss is happening, then out of this 100 which is being supplied by the battery, only 98 is going towards the motor. Out of this 98, again, some part is being consumed by auxiliary consumers like the aux battery charging, like the headlamps, tail lamps, and so on. Now, when I am looking at these numbers, I am actually not looking at them very strictly. So it is not necessarily always 6%. It depends on the driving pattern. So somebody who is always driving during night, then the auxiliary consumer losses will be more. Somebody who is driving always during day, then these losses will be lesser. Okay, so based on driver's own behavior and patterns, when and how he is driving, based on that these auxiliary losses will vary. So out of the 100 which is available from the battery after the discharge losses are considered, 6% is gone to the auxiliary consumers and only 94 is available. Out of this 94, again, there will be some losses in the powertrain. So there will be losses in the powertrain in terms of electrical losses, electrical transmission losses, and there will be mechanical transmission losses. All these losses together will account for 18% of the power loss. So this loss will be loss at the motor itself. That is a so motor, if it has, let's say, only 90% efficiency, then 10% is the motor's loss. Let's say there is inverter which has like 92% efficiency, then 8% is coming from the inverter itself. So like that, there are some conversions which are happening in between, and these conversions are responsible for this 18% loss in the powertrain. This conversion, and at the same time there is also transmission loss. So all these electrical equipments are connected through wires, and based on the resistance of these wires, there will be some I square R losses at the wires themselves again, and there will be some contact resistances. So many resistances are there in between, and all these resistances, if they are low, the losses will be low. If the resistances are high, losses will be high, and that's why making connections is very important part of the design of the powertrain. How do you make the connections? So most of the times in the batteries, the connections are welded connections so that the reliability of the connection is more, and resistance losses at these contacts is as less as possible. Now, out of this energy which is supplied to the powertrain from the battery after reducing the auxiliary consumers, out of this 100 which is available from the battery again. So if I'm converting, assuming this 94 as 100, then only 82 is available for the power to the wheels because there is loss in the transmission itself. Out of this 82, again, wheel is trying to push the vehicle. So assuming there is a vehicle like this, let's say a hatchback car, and there are front wheels which are driving wheels which are pushing the road backwards. As I explained in the earlier slides, it is trying to push the road backwards so that the vehicle moves forwards. But while the vehicle is moving forwards, there is friction happening at the road. There is rolling friction happening at the road, which might be responsible for losses up to 23%, depending on how much of the rolling resistance coefficient is there, what is the tire material, how much of the gross vehicle weight is there, and so on. So based on that, there will be almost like up to 23% of loss can be there in the rolling friction itself. Same way, the vehicle, when it is being driven around, there is always air around the vehicle, and this air is, when vehicle moves towards left, the air gets displaced and air does not want to get displaced. So it will offer some resistance, that is air drag resistance, which will be responsible for 28% of the loss of the energy. So wheel is supplying some energy to move the vehicle, but out of this again 23 plus 28, that amounts to about 51% of energy is being utilized only to remove these resistances, the rolling friction, the air drag, and so on. And that's why when you have very less rolling friction of the wheels, energy efficiency is highest. So this 49% is the one which is being used to increase the kinetic energy of the vehicle. So kinetic energy or velocity of the vehicle, because kinetic energy is, as you know, half mv square. Mass you cannot change. So here velocity change, kinetic energy. So change in the velocity is being, so it is something which is occurring because of only 49% of the energy which is supplied by the wheel. Out of that, like the remaining 51% is being utilized to overcome the losses, being utilized to overcome the resistances applied by air, applied by the ground. Now again, on the right hand side, so up till this point we were consuming energy from the battery pack. On the right hand side will be regenerating. So let's say if the same energy is being regenerated during braking, then again some part of it is gone into air drag, some part of it is gone into rolling friction, some part of it is gone into braking losses. So about 5% braking loss because there will be friction at the brakes, losses at the powertrain, losses at the auxiliary consumers, and finally some amount will be available for recuperation, some small amount will be available for regeneration. Okay, so that's how the energy flow in the EVs occur. Take a look at the grand picture again. Energy comes from the charger, goes to the battery, from battery to the powertrain. Some part is lost into discharge losses at the battery itself. Some part is lost into auxiliary consumers to supply energy to the aux consumers like headlamp, tail lamp, infotainment system, and so on. Some part is lost into powertrain. So electrical, mechanical transmission losses. Electrical transmission loss, like there is a inverter loss, there is motor loss, and then transmission, mechanical transmission loss. When the power comes from the mechanical transmission to the wheel, there is again rolling friction loss, air drag loss, and some part is available for increasing the velocity, increasing the acceleration of the vehicle. And once this acceleration happens, if let's say we brake the vehicle, then during braking, kinetic energy recovery system will come into picture, and this will do some regeneration of the energy. During regeneration, again, all the things which were producing inefficiency while we were supplying energy to the wheel, all these things will again produce inefficiency while taking energy from the wheels. So rolling friction, air drag, braking loss, powertrain loss, auxiliary consumers loss, and so on. And then some part is available for charging of the battery. So while we were seeing this whole thing, we saw how the vehicle moves, and while the vehicle moves, basically it moves against all these resistances. Firstly, the rolling friction, secondly this drag, air drag, thirdly, let's say currently it is on a flat road. If the same vehicle is being driven on an inclined road, then the vehicle is again pulled by ground. So there will be some pull which is available from the earth, which will try to pull the vehicle from this hill. And if it is, let's say, going uphill on this slanted road, if it is going uphill on this slanted road, then it has to also work against gravity, because it is also getting increased. The elevation of the vehicle is getting increased. The height with respect to the ground is getting increased, and that's why ground will apply some gravitational acceleration which the vehicle has to overcome. In case of flat road, it was automatically getting overcome because the because ground is not moving and the vehicle. So if it is, let's say, stand still on a flat road, the force which is applied by the gravity is getting cancelled here at the ground itself, right? But when it is on the slanted road, the vehicle is getting pulled back against the speed. So this resistance also, while going uphill, this resistance also it needs to overcome. But while coming downhill, then this gravitational pull will act in our favor, in the vehicle's favor, and then the energy which is to be supplied by the battery pack, or energy or the power which is supplied by the motor, will reduce because it is getting assistance because of the gravitational pull, right? So there are three different resistances: rolling resistance because of the rolling friction, drag resistance, and gradient resistance. Once all these three different resistances are overcome, so I have a vehicle, and this vehicle is being driven towards left. There are three different resistances which are against me, against the motion. So let's say I have some values of these resistances as F1, F2, and F3. And if the force applied by the wheels is F4, if this F4 is more than F1, F2, and F3 together, then only vehicle will move. If this force is less than all these forces together, then vehicle cannot move, right? Even if it is equal, then also vehicle cannot move, because there is all of the force which is being applied by the wheel is getting cancelled out against rolling resistance, drag resistance, or gradient resistance, right? It cannot move or it cannot change its state of rest or state of motion, right? So it is, if it is already in the motion, then if the F4 is less than F1, F2, F3 together, then velocity will reduce. If F4 is equal to F1 plus F2 plus F3, then velocity will remain constant, because there is no extra force available to push this vehicle. This extra force which is available to push this vehicle is called as acceleration resistance so we'll call it resistance, because that also needs to be overcome from inertial perspective. So if I go into inertial frame of reference, then this can also be called as a resistance, or you can also call it acceleration force. So this acceleration force, which is F4, which is supplied by the wheel, let's say, and this force which is supplied by the wheel will be, or let's call it Fa, because Fa is different from F4 in this case. F4 will be the total force which is supplied by the wheel, and or shall I call it by some other name? Let's call it total traction, call it FT. FT and FT. So total traction force which is supplied by the wheel, if it is more than F1, F2, F3 put together, then the remaining part, which is Ft minus F1, F2, F3 put together, will be used for accelerating the vehicle. If this is not getting overcome, then vehicle will actually decelerate, it will reduce the velocity. Okay, so I hope you have understood. If not, we can again discuss this at the end of the session for only those people who have not yet understood this. So let's move ahead. Let's talk about the first resistance, which is rolling resistance, composed primarily of tire deformation, tire penetration, surface compression, tire slippage, and air circulation around the wheel, and so many different other factors which are known and unknown till now. But all those put together, they are expressed by one simple term called rolling coefficient of friction, mu r, which is taking care of all these four different factors. So this rolling coefficient of friction, if it is known, then the rolling resistance force is calculated as mu r mg. If the vehicle's rolling direction is towards right, then the rolling resistance will be towards left. It will be opposing the direction of movement of the vehicle. Resistance from tire deformation means that while the vehicle's tire is on the road here, the tire itself gets deformed when it is resting on the road. So although it is shown currently circular shape, you might see a some flat portion in the tire, right? And this flat portion is here when the tire position angle is, let's say, 0 degrees. As soon as it becomes 90 degrees, let's say the vehicle moves ahead. Now this portion comes into contact with the road. So this much of the compression of the tire happens, and then this earlier portion which was compressed will get relieved, and this portion will get compressed now, and this compression portion will change its location, and the tire which is not under compression will get relieved, and during this change of shape of the tire there will be loss, kind of a hysteresis loss you can call it. So it is responsible for 90% of the total rolling resistance. Some tire penetration, so there can be some small maybe kind of, what do you call it, some rubble if there is on the road, and if this rubble penetrates inside the tire and makes a small depression, again that is a temporary depression that might be responsible for 4%. Similarly, the tire slippage and air circulation around the wheel while the vehicle is moving, while the wheel is moving, it is also displacing the air which is there. And while this displacement is occurring based on the tire shape, based on how the rim is aligned, if the rim is completely kind of covered, and in that case the loss will be lesser. If the rim is having holes like this, then the loss will be more, and so on. So this is also responsible for the complete losses during the rolling resistance, during the rolling of the wheel. And rolling resistance, as we talked about, is basically calculated from a simple formula, which is mu r mg. In this case, mu r becomes rolling coefficient of friction. This mu r is dependent on what is the road material and what is the tire material. So if the wheel is there, steel wheel and steel rail, like in case of locomotives, railways, in that case the rolling resistance is very less, 0.001 to 0.0025. For bicycle tires again it is less if the bicycle tire is having good inflated tire. If the tire is not inflated properly, if the person sitting on the bicycle is pretty heavy, then there will be good enough tire deformation and this number will vary. But in total you can maybe assume it to be 0.0015 to 0.0025. Again, based on what is the road surface condition. Truck tire on asphalt 0.006 to 0.01. Ordinary car tires on concrete 0.01 to 0.015. Car tires on tar road or asphalt road 0.03, and so on, like for car tire on a loose sand 0.2 to 0.4 and so on. So different road condition tire materials have different rolling resistance coefficient. These numbers expressed are in case of OEMs, these are generally available from the tire manufacturers. So people who are coming from OEMs for this training will be getting equivalent the relevant numbers for your tires from your tire manufacturer. Now let's look at the formula again, mu r mg. So this is dependent on what is the rolling coefficient of friction and what is the gross vehicle weight m. M in this case is GVW, gross vehicle weight. G in this case is force due to gravity, gravitational acceleration. Gravitational acceleration is G. So mu r mg is the total rolling resistance. To reduce this rolling resistance, you need to reduce rolling coefficient of friction or reduce the complete mass. Only two things are there. G cannot be changed. G is same for when you are living on Earth. So either you can change mu r by changing the tire material, by changing the pressure which is tire inflated by. So if the pressure is high, then this area which is getting deformed at the tire and road interface, that is smaller. In that case, coefficient of friction is less. The second resistance is air drag, aerodynamic resistance. It is present because of the turbulent airflow around the vehicle body and friction of air over the vehicle body. Vehicle component resistances from radiators and air vents and so on. So if there are mirrors which are coming out, kind of projecting out from the vehicle, that also is changing the drag resistance. If somebody is taking the hand out while driving, that will also be affecting the aerodynamic resistance, that will increase the aerodynamic resistance. The aerodynamic resistance is calculated by this formula, rho by 2 CD AF V square. In this case, rho is density of air, CD is drag coefficient, AF is projected frontal area, V is relative velocity of the vehicle with respect to the air around it. Relative velocity we are talking because if the air is blowing towards the vehicle, so if vehicle is going towards right and wind is blowing towards left, then relative velocity of the vehicle with respect to wind will be higher. If wind and vehicle both are blowing in the same, both are flowing towards the or moving towards the same directions, left or right, then in that case, that will be having lower relative velocity. The vehicle will have lower relative velocity with respect to the wind, and wind will assist the driving in that case. So velocity will be lesser. In this formula, you need to consider lesser velocity. Aerodynamic resistance here, FD, the CD value here is the only thing which you can change during the vehicle design, which will hamper how the aerodynamic resistance will behave. So rho, which is density of air, cannot be changed. The velocity at which the vehicle is being driven, that is based on the driving characteristic, driver's characteristic. Now, once you know what is the projected frontal area, because you must have during the design phase, if it is a tall boy design, you know what is the height. If it is, let's say, 1.5 meters, which you have frozen, then what you can change is the shape of the vehicle so that the drag coefficient can come down and the whole aerodynamic resistance can come down. So for the same height of the vehicle at different designs, you can see that how the CD value is changing here on the right hand side picture, having the same height but CD value different because the shape is different. And with the each generation of the vehicle, same vehicle with different generations, model year 1950, 57, 78, 78 again, 81 and 77 here. So with different model year, different models of the vehicle, different shape of the vehicle body, the drag resistance is changing. Okay. CD, which is drag resistance, is present because when you are pushing the air around. So let's say if you have a vehicle like this again. So when you're driving towards left, the air which is in the front is pushing the vehicle backwards, and when the vehicle is pushing the air towards forward, towards the left, the air itself is pushing it backwards towards right. At the same time, when vehicle move towards left, this particular area becomes vacuum, because what was here was the vehicle earlier, vehicle body. Now the vehicle moved and this becomes vacuum, and so that this vacuum pulls the vehicle backwards again. So these two things, the pressure from the front, positive pressure from the front and negative pressure from the rear side, at the same time, because the air is moving around the vehicle's outer body, there is friction which is occurring here. All these things are responsible for increasing the drag completely, and all these three phenomena together are expressed by this drag coefficient, which is CD. Okay. So again, few more examples here. So this old age cars which you see here at the left side, having different CD values 0.85, 0.5, 0.32, 0.45. So least amongst these is having 0.32, which again is obvious from how the vehicle shape is there, right? So if the shape is more streamlined, more like aerofoil, aerofoil has 0.007, which is least drag coefficient. So if the shape is more like aerofoil, then the drag resistance is lesser. Okay. So this EVs, which in this case of in case of EVs, the rolling resistance and drag resistance play a very important role while deciding the range of the vehicle. Same way they also decide the range of the ICE engine vehicles, but in case of ICE engine vehicles, the fuel tank and the capacity of the fuel tank is so huge that the uh, range of the complete range of the vehicle, how you are driving and what is the tire pressure, you don't monitor it so much because that doesn't matter much. And whenever the fuel tank gets empty, we just have a habit of seeing the fuel meter and just refuel it at the pump, and that's it. So uh, we never used to bother about what is the tire pressure and how my vehicle's CD value is and so on. But here on after, as you are seeing all these new age electric vehicles, uh, the popular amongst them like Tesla, they are having CD values which are close to 0.23, 0.29 like that for different types, different vehicle models. There was one vehicle which was GM's General Motors EV1. So this GM EV1 had CD value of 0.19, which is kind of a milestone for all the vehicles today. The vehicle is named GM EV1. You can search about that vehicle on the net and find more information about it. Although this was technologically very forward and kind of a uh, milestone vehicle design, but it was not commercially successful because of various reasons. And there is a very good documentary available on the YouTube about this. You can take a look at that. About the third resistance, which is gradient resistance. This gradient resistance is coming because when you are going uphill, like in this case, when you are going uphill, the ground pulls you back. So when you go towards right uphill, the ground pulls you back. And while the ground pulls you back because of the gravitational acceleration mg, the force which is g, fg in the same plane like this theta plane here, now can be expressed as mg sine theta, right? So this mg sine theta becomes the force of pull by earth when you are going uphill. When you are going downhill, then the same force will assist the motion and can be expressed as minus mg sine theta. So once all these three resistances are overcome, then whatever is remaining force which is coming from the wheel will be responsible for acceleration of the vehicle. So the acceleration of the vehicle, the force can be expressed as mass into acceleration. So earlier what we saw is total tractive effort was Ft, and we saw that if Ft is more than the force due to rolling resistance, the resistance due to rolling resistance plus drag resistance plus gradient resistance, all this put together, then Ft minus all these three forces will be equal to Fa, and this Fa, what is remaining, will give rise to this much acceleration of the vehicle. So if this Fa is negative, then acceleration will be negative. Negative acceleration means deceleration. So vehicle speed will come down. If you are not giving more force than rolling plus drag plus gradient together. Okay. So that was about total traction force. Let's take a look at all these formulae once again. So when the vehicle is going uphill, all these forces are against the vehicle speed. Vehicle speed is towards right. Vehicle is speeding towards right. Aerodynamic force will be towards left. Here, the inertia of the vehicle will be again towards left. Internal friction will be towards left, and gravitational pull will be again towards left because you are going uphill. And tire rolling resistance will also be towards left. So all these forces or resistances are opposing the motion of the vehicle. Rolling resistance expressed as mu r mg, drag resistance expressed as rho by 2 cdf v square, acceleration resistance expressed as ma, and gradient resistance expressed as mg sin theta. So with this, I guess now you are ready to solve the first example. Let me read this out for you. A two-wheeler scooter OEM has decided to launch two versions of a particular model, a long range version and a performance version. Find peak power required for 0 to 40 kmph time of 6.5 seconds. So you need to accelerate within 6.5 seconds for long range variant and within 4 seconds 0 to 40 for performance variant on a flat surface. So there is no gradient here on a flat surface. Peak wheel torque and peak motor torque is also to be calculated at 5% gradient. So if the vehicle is to be driven on a gradient of 5% gradient without acceleration, so here it needs to be without acceleration. So you just need to move and do not need to accelerate, okay, without acceleration. What is the peak wheel torque required and peak motor torque required? And following information is given. Frontal area is 0.7 square meters. Gross vehicle weight is 175 kgs. Drag coefficient is 0.6, very good drag coefficient. Rolling coefficient of friction is 0.014. Density of air 1.2 kilogram per meter cube. Battery pack size 48 volt by 90 Ah for performance version and 72 volt by 60 Ah for long range version. So here we have changed voltage and current ratings for our calculation purpose. In most of the cases, voltage will remain same and battery capacity will vary for different versions. Most probably the voltages will be same, but for now, just to increase little bit of complexity, we have changed the voltage of the performance and long range variant. Cell depth of discharge is 90%, motor efficiency is 90%, final drive ratio is 22/1. Again, just assume it to be some number. And tire size is 90 by 90 by R12. I hope you understand how to calculate the radius of the wheel based on this. Assume suitable values wherever necessary. So if you need any explanation of any of these terms, you can unmute yourself and let us know. I hope you know what is cell DOD. So let's say if the cell is having some 100 Ah capacity and depth DOD means depth of discharge. So if depth of discharge is 90%, that means we are not using 100 Ah but only 90 Ah capacity of this battery. Okay, we are not using 100 but 90. This is generally done to increase the life of the battery. So when the DOD is less, number of cycles of life which you get for the battery are more. Tire size here R12 means a wheel size. 90 is the width of the tire and the next 90 is ratio of the annular height of the tire to the width. So to show it on actual
Dhruvankur, I
view.
think Akshay has a question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
can you?
R12 means 12 is in inches, right?
Yeah, 12 is inches. So I'm showing on this current slide, as you can see, this is showing 195 by 55 R16 is the tire size. As it shows the rim in this case, wheel rim is of 16 inches diameter. Profile is 55 percentage of 195 mm. So 195 is in millimeters of width, and profile height is 55% of 195. So same way you have to treat these numbers as well, 90, 90, R12. So let's take 10-15 minutes to solve this question, and I'll solve it for you once you solve it yourself.
Dhruvankur, Harshir, I think we can start in a minute or two so that we might be able to get to another problem statement. we're sort of running short on time.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead. So what is being asked is peak motor power required for 0 to 40 kmph. So let's convert this 0 to 40 in 6.5 seconds and in 4 seconds into SI units. So let's call 6.5 seconds, or this will be long range version. So acceleration for long range and acceleration for performance version. I hope you have calculated these two numbers. What you need to do is just 40 minus 0 into 5 by 18 to convert kmph into meter per second. In how many seconds for first one? 6.5 seconds and 4 seconds for the next one. So divide it by the times of 6.5 and you'll have the long range acceleration. Have you got this number? Forty into 5 by 18 divided by 6.5.
So
This would be
1.7
1.7 meter per second square, and the next one will be 2.77 meter per second square. Now, the force required to deliver this acceleration would be F equal to mass into acceleration, F equal to ma. Mass is given, which is not changing whether it is performance variant or whether it is long range variant. So we need to assume same mass. Although this might not be the case in actual vehicle, as the battery pack weight will vary. But for now, to reduce little bit of calculations, we are assuming the GVW to be same 175. So just multiply 175 by 2.77 and we have force which is required for performance version will be 485 Newton, and that for the long range version variant will be multiply this mass 175 by 1.7 and we have 298 as the force which is required to be applied on the vehicle by the wheel. Now, to know the peak motor power required, we need to assume that the velocity of the vehicle is almost 40. So it is going from 0 to 40. So if I just plot this velocity versus time, if I'm going from 0 to 40 linearly, then maximum power requirement will be exactly at 40 or just little bit lesser than 40, like 39.999999 like that. So which will be the peak power requirement, and to get that peak power requirement you need to multiply force by velocity. So force into velocity will give me power, and velocity in this case at 40 kmph we have already calculated it to be 11.11 meter per second, right? So 11.11 into this force, and this force will give me what is the power required at different for the different variants of this vehicle. So 298 into 11.11 is giving me how much? Almost like 3.3 kilowatt.
Can I ask a doubt?
And for the performance version it is going to be 485 into 11.11, that is 5.3 or 5.4 kilowatt.
Sir.
So maybe calculations are a bit off, but I'm getting 3.8 kilowatt and at 90% efficiency 4.2 kilowatt.
Okay, so you have also, I'm yet to consider the motor efficiency.
Even at the base level, it's 3.7 kilowatt. So the traction force is coming out to be 330 Newton and not 298. So it's like 32 Newton somewhere that I'm getting additionally. But okay, just.
Are you getting same acceleration?
Yeah, acceleration is the same, 1.7.
Mass is 175. 175 into acceleration is
300
force.
298, correct.
Yes.
So that's it. And then force due to drag and rolling.
Drag and rolling at so here, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so rolling is 24 and drag is 7.7, and that adds up to 332. So that's the total traction force.
Okay. Yeah, anybody else has any question? So rolling will be constant whether whatever may be the velocity, because it is not changing. Force due to rolling resistance is mu r mg. Mu r is given as 0.014, m is 175 and g is 9.81. So this FRR, how much is it coming, Harsh?
FRR I'm getting as 24.04, so 24 Newton.
Okay, 24 Newton. And drag we need to calculate at maximum speed of 40 kmph, because we want to calculate what is the peak motor power. So peak motor power will be at highest speed of 40 kmph. So rho by 2 CD A of V square, and CD in this case is 0.6, rho is 1.2, AF is given as how much, 0.7, and velocity is 11.11. So just do that calculation. And how much is the drag resistance, Harsh?
31.1.
Okay. I'm getting a little bit larger value here. Okay, I have made a mistake maybe. 2 divided by 5. Yeah, 31.1. So roughly about 31 Newton. And let's add these all forces together. 298 plus 31 plus 24.
Wouldn't we need to take an average of velocity since it's going from 0 to 40 instead of taking it at 40?
So what we want is peak motor power. So what will happen in this case is the motor power required will be rising as cubic function of the velocity, and maximum power will be achieved at highest velocity here. So 353 into 11.11 would be 3.9. So that is right, 3.9 kilowatt here. But we also have motor efficiency given as 90%. So divided by 90%. And we have a value, actual value of the motor input power required to achieve this particular acceleration 0 to 40 in 6.5 would be 4.4 kilowatt. Now in this case we are yet to assume any value for the inverter or motor controller efficiency. There will be some transmission losses as well, and some mechanical transmission losses as well, that will increase this power input required. But this power is only momentary, so maximum would be 4.4, but this will be only for few milliseconds which will be required. So there can be a little less power also can be sufficient for to overcome all this all the resistances here. So although theoretically it says 4.4 kilowatt, not necessarily the peak power of your motor to be 4.4 kilowatt, because peak power for a motor is little bit difficult, kind of a tricky concept. If the motor is having 3 kilowatt as capacity, let's say 3 kilowatt continuous power output, then it might have about 4.5 kilowatt of peak for maybe 30 seconds. It might have 5 kilowatt of peak for 20 seconds. It might have maybe 7 kilowatt peak for 1 second, like that. So a same motor having different peak values at different times, and that is what decides the motor selection in this particular example. So
yeah, hi.
for
Hello.
now we'll be just sticking to what is the peak power required, and peak power required for our long range version is 4.4. Yeah, somebody was asking some question.
Yeah, hi. Can you take it once again, this slide?
Once
From
again.
beginning, from acceleration, can you take it once more? I think
Okay.
it's a basic one. You went fast basically.
Okay, we are actually a little bit short of time, but I'll repeat this. Yeah. So what we are trying to do here is adding all the resistances together. This here at the top is acceleration resistance. There is rolling resistance, and then there is drag resistance here. Let me just change colors of paint so that you can maybe understand it more clearly.
No, I want to know how you came to the motor calculation. Just once from acceleration you can
You
take.
understood how the forces are calculated?
Yeah, this 3.9 kilowatt, and how you came to 3.9 kilowatt. You can start from
Okay.
acceleration, long range or performance once.
Okay, just a minute. So rolling resistance and drag resistance you understood, right? How it was calculated.
Yes.
Drag was 31 Newton, rolling is 24, and acceleration is 298. I'm just adding these three values together. That will give me total traction effort. So total tractive effort will be addition of 298 plus 31 drag plus rolling resistance of 24. In total, it becomes 353, right? Yeah, 353. Is it? Newton. This is total traction effort. Force into velocity is power. Okay. force into velocity is power. So if the if I'm plotting this particular value here on a graph, let's say my velocity is increasing from 0 to 40, force into velocity will increase cubically because there is also a v square term in force. So you must have seen here v square in case of drag formula. So v square into v, so that's why it becomes a cubic curve. Now on this cubic curve, you are saying that at exactly maximum 40 kmph speed, the force is maximum. Force into velocity is maximum. Okay. So this power, if I am trying to calculate force into velocity, it should be calculated at maximum speed, and that's why at v term we put 11.11, which is meter per second conversion of 40 kilometer per hour. So 40 kmph is equal to 11.11 meter per second. So let's multiply this force 353 by 11.11, which will give me 3.9 kilowatt as the output. Are you getting this number, 3.9 kilowatt? Once you get the motor output 3.9, motor efficiency is 90%. So input has to be more than this 3.9. So let's divide this 3.9 by 0.9 efficiency, and we'll get 4.4 as the input power required for this motor in kilowatt. Okay.
Yeah, this is okay. This is okay. Yeah, just once only I forgot. I forgot the acceleration formula. This is, I think, change in velocity. 1.7. How you have got it? This is okay.
Change in okay.
Acceleration 1.7. How you have got? That's all only.
Okay. So for that, what we did is 0 to 40 kmph in 6.5 seconds. And what we did, we converted 40 into meter per second, which will be 11.11. So 0 to 11.11 meter per second in 6.5 seconds. So divide this by 6.5 and you'll get acceleration. Rate of change of velocity per unit time.
Yeah, great. Now got it. Yeah. Thank you.
So if these numbers everyone is getting.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, I have a doubt. Sir, while taking the tractive force, you added the values of the rolling friction, the drag force, as well as the 298, that is the accelerative force. So only for the long range vehicles. So why not the performance one?
Performance I am yet to add.
Okay, sir.
I'm yet to add that.
Okay,
so
sir.
For performance, the same thing will happen. On the same lines, 485 plus 24 plus 31 will be
so everything remains same
500
acceleration force, which will change now because that acceleration is quicker. So the rest we just add up similar.
Yes. So how much is the answer you are getting? 6 kilowatt here, right? 6 kilowatt before the efficiency, and after efficiency.
Yes.
6.66.
Yes.
7 kilowatt. The wheel torque and peak motor torque at 5 degrees, 5% gradient. So you need to convert this percentage into degrees first. For that, you need to take tan inverse of 5 degrees, which is 5 by 100. That will give you degrees. So I guess we have almost now have crossed the end time which was allocated to me, 8 o'clock. So this particular calculation you can take as home assignment. I'll just move over to the next questions, and maybe we can just discuss in few minutes how those can be solved. If at all we need to maybe solve these questions, if you need any help in solving these questions, we can take up some other time in the coming week. Question number 2, utilizing data from question 1, calculate total energy utilized for acceleration from 0 to 20 followed by 20 to 0 kmph at 15% regeneration efficiency capability. So here you need to first go from 0 to 20 in the same time for the long range variant, 6.5 seconds, and back from 20 to 0 in the same time, 6.5 seconds. But during regeneration, you need to assume efficiency of regeneration as 15% only. During acceleration, you are assuming efficiency of the motor to be 90%, and during regeneration you are assuming efficiency of the regeneration of the motor to be 15%. Okay, that's the only change. So you can try to solve this, and if at all any difficulty is there, we can talk about that. And you just need to calculate what is the total energy utilized while doing so. Question 3 is calculating. Yeah.
Question number 2. So generally, because the motor will act as a generator, so generally the efficiency in the generation period is generally 15%.
No, so what happens is at lesser RPMs, at lesser speeds, the efficiency is less because the regeneration does not happen because it has fixed gear ratio. If the RPM is less, regeneration is very difficult because the voltage drops down. The voltage of regeneration comes down, so regeneration does not happen, and that's why we have assumed it to be 15% only.
So in two-wheelers and four-wheelers, generally what is the regeneration efficiency generally?
So overall through the drive cycle, it is somewhere between it can be as low as 10% as well, and can be as high as 40%.
Right.
But that depends on what is the driving cycle, what is the speed at which the vehicle is driving, and so on. At lesser speeds, the efficiency is less. At very high speeds, again, it does not happen because then voltage is very high. Regeneration voltage becomes very high. So at that very high voltage, the battery might damage. That's why regeneration does not happen. We'll talk about these things during regeneration session. But for now, you can just assume these values to be between 10 to 40% like that. Calculate range and total number of cycles for a passenger vehicle if it runs on a flat surface with following driving cycle. The numbers which are required for the vehicle parameters are given here, and the driving cycle is given, which is also showing how the speed is varying throughout. To solve this particular question, you need to divide it into 4 different sections and then solve all 4 different sections separately, like 0 to 10 first, then 10 to 60 second, 60 to 80 third, and 80 to 100 fourth, and then add them together to get the value of total energy which is utilized from the battery pack to overcome all the resistances during all these 4 different sections of the driving cycle, and that will solve this question completely. Question 4 is when all these factors are there, and if at all there is extra electric load of 300 watts for only 2 hours while the vehicle is driving at the night time, and this extra electric load is considered only once during every charge and discharge cycle. So what you need to do is basically reduce this number from the overall capacity of the battery pack. In question number 3, it was 300 volts battery pack, right? 340 volts battery pack of 110 Ah. So this particular battery pack, the amount of energy which is getting utilized in overcoming this driving cycle, that will get reduced by 300 into 2 hours. 300 into 2, that is 600 watt hours of energy will be deducted from the battery pack size, and then run the same calculations again, and you will get answer for question number 4. Now for question 5, a city bus with below mentioned parameters has a target range of 240 kmph kilometers, and some other numbers are given. So it is again similar to what you solved in question number 3, except some numbers are changing here. Now you have motor efficiency given, and what is being asked is to find the battery pack capacity from the range. Earlier range was to be found out. Now the pack capacity is to be calculated for a given voltage system. System voltage is 540, and max power requirement at 90% motor efficiency is to be found out. Okay. Driving cycle is also given for this e-bus. Question 6, calculate total number of driving cycles possible for question 5, earlier question. For regeneration on and efficiency of 25%. So in this question, regeneration is off. Regeneration is not allowed. While if the regeneration is considered, then how many kilometers can it go? That we need to find out. This last question is about the actual Indian driving cycle, MIDC, modified Indian driving cycle. The same driving cycle's part 1 of 195 seconds is used as parameter for range calculation for passenger car type of vehicles. Now this 195 second cycle, as you can see, it is little bit complex than what we have seen in the earlier examples. Now to solve such examples, you can maybe take help of some simulation tools. We'll talk about what kind of simulation tools can be used for these types of examples in coming sessions. So I guess that is all from my side for today.
Thanks, Durvankur. Okay, guys, we'll keep this channel open for at least